Namaste. With regard to writings of Aurobindo, we can, the word categorized is not a good thing when we talk about Aurobindo, but still, we can categorize them into four distinct categories from the point of view of chronology. So, the first part is the pre Arya period. Mainly, it consists of writings during the revolutionary period, almost from 1893, soon after he has come, and right up to 1913. Most of it is through the three journals, Dharma, Karma Yogin, Bande Matram. Also, some of the writings in Yugantar, which have been lost, unfortunately. And Indu Prakash, that writings, New Lamps for the Old, which often are published separately. So there is a whole set of writings, and even after coming to Pondicherry, before the Arya, Aurobindo wrote certain thoughts and aphorisms which continued right from 1912 onwards, records of yoga which continued from 1909 till 1927, then Sri Aurobindo, what is known today as Sri Aurobindo Upanishad, the yoga and its objects, so Vedic and philological studies. So there are quite a few which are pre-Arya period, but most of them are during the revolutionary time. Then the second category is from 1914 to 1921, which is primarily the Arya, and now they are available as major works of Aurobindo, plus they add some of the like Bande Matram and Karma Yogin. So these are the major works of Aurobindo. And then from 1927 onwards, there is a whole set of writings which are primarily letters. So these are wonderful because very often people say that they find Aurobindo's writings difficult, and no doubt that the Arya writings are bit difficult, and the reason is they come from a very vast universal consciousness written in an impersonal vein. He is not writing addressing to this person or that person, but to the human consciousness, to the human soul in general. And these writings are like Ganga Avtaran. So it's not easy when the Ganges are descending and somebody is standing below with that mighty Ganges. If one is not prepared, sometimes it can be very unnerving. It can be disorienting, and if the path is very small, it can smash it. So very often people, when we approach Aurobindo's writings of the Arya days, if we have a very small, limited, narrow consciousness, it becomes very difficult, especially when we are already cobwebbed. Don't look for this word meaning in the dictionary, but what it means is that when the mind is full of cobwebs gathered from here, there, books, WhatsApp, newspaper, casual reading of all kinds of things, and on that we have based certain ideas about what spiritual life is, what this is, what that is, and it creates a big hurdle because we have this impression that we know, but when we approach Aurobindo, the right state is we do not know. So when we have this humility plus the aspiration to know, which is a very rare combination. Because when there is a jigyasa, very often people have already read. I have seen people keep asking that, what kind of Vedanta is Aurobindo's writings, what category it falls in. Because they've read a lot and they have developed this feeling that we know. But true knowledge is a knowledge which comes by direct experience, pratyaksh. And all this book knowledge, scholarly knowledge has its place. It's a kind of intellectual preparation, but it becomes sometimes a block when we have to go beyond. And Aurobindo did go beyond. Not just beyond, but way beyond. And honestly, I can say this for myself at least. Before coming to Aurobindo, having read 3-4 commentaries on the Gita, some of them on the Upanishads, the Vedas, Ramayana, Mahabharata, Vivek Chudamani, God knows so many other books, Western and Eastern. After reading Aurobindo, it paled as if I'm looking at some pale evening lights, and this is the sun. So it's very difficult even to go back to anything else, because one clearly sees this is something so powerful, wonderful, so complete, so harmonious. It brings the sense of truth all through. But as I said, it requires tremendous humility that, well, I really don't know. With all this that I have read and probably cluttered my brain with, even when there is a clarity of concept, still This new thing will change everything. So often I use this terminology that, this example about clarity of concepts. Now, people get married, husband and wife are living happily, and they have a clarity about their roles, relation, their way of life. Now, when the new child arrives, everything turns topsy-turvy. Because now the entire life is being organized around this new baby. And Sri Aurobindo, he has given birth to not one new baby, but several offsprings in several fields. And therefore, it is very difficult to, the whole clutter in the brain, this clarity has to completely be surrendered. And then the new thing emerges. The mother herself speaks of it, that when she met Sri Aurobindo and she was sitting at his feet, while that was the difference. She has, apart from the fact that she is Jagat Janni and who her husband was, we need not go into that. But she says that he would discuss with Sri Aurobindo, and he would often, because of the Buddhist influence, that, this world is created by desire, and Sri Aurobindo would say it is delight. So they would have a discussion, and there would be disagreement as far as he is concerned. And the mother would just sit somewhere below, and she said, suddenly all the vast synthesis she had built within her, based on her experiences, which had come out in the Cosmic Review, the Journal of Philosophy, which used to come out from Algeria and France together, all that slowly just melted away. That's why she says, I am like a newborn child. So I believe to read those writings, it's beautiful to become a newborn child and just sit at Sri Aurobindo's feet, like the Upanishads, sitting at the feet of the master. And then to tell him that I don't know, I don't understand, teach me. Then it becomes very clear. All the writings, the Life Divine, the Synthesis of Yoga, the Human Cycle, everything become very clear, because now Sri Aurobindo has taken it to himself to teach us. But what we do is just the other way around, that I know, I am going to discuss with you, and let's see where we go. So this is the second set of writing. But this is not easy. It's blessed that somebody can have that. And I'm talking only of writings, not of conversations. Conversations are a different genre of writings. They are there with evening talks and later on. So that's a different set of writing. But then from 1927 onwards, we see a different kind of writing which is much more personalized. So disciples asked questions and Sri Aurobindo replied. Now it may look like, okay, it were their questions, but not so simply. Like when we look at read the Gita, it is the question of Arjuna. And without a doubt, if Buddha asked the same question, Sri Aurobindo himself says, if Buddha asked Sri Krishna the question whether he should go in search of a radical cure for the suffering of mankind, or should he fight the war to defend the Sakya kingdom, Sri Aurobindo would tell him, Sri Krishna would tell him to go and find the truth. And if Sri Ramakrishna ever came and asked Krishna, should I teach in vernacular and do my duties, or should I go in search of my, fulfill that seeking for truth, for wisdom, for light, for love? And he would say, yes, you should do that. But because most of human beings fall into the category of Arjuna, in the sense we lead a life where action is important, and Arjuna is the Rajo-Sattvic person who is governed by certain ideals, and at the same time he doesn't want to actually take to sannyas. He is saying this because he is seeing the battlefield and the grim scenario, he wants to escape. But most of us are like Arjuna, that if we know how to lead our life better and more beautifully, we would choose that. So he says to Arjuna, this is given, and therefore it has a certain degree of universal applicability, and it also has many truths which will apply, eternal truths for all times. So in Sri Aurobindo's letters also, though they are individual, in the yoga, once Sri Aurobindo started accepting disciples, which is from 1927 onwards, or if I may say end of 1926, because though the ashram was never formed officially and Sri Aurobindo never said, okay, bacha, now you are initiated by me, this never took place, because he revolutionized everything. Yet we may say that from 24th November 1926 onwards, when the Shri Krishna descended and joined completely with Sri Aurobindo. From that time onwards, when mother was placed in the forefront, from that time onwards, there was a kind of acceptance of the disciple. And how they were accepted, as Sri Aurobindo says, whoever is accepted by the mother is a disciple of Sri Aurobindo. So people came, asked the mother gave them work. And that was the end of the story. So it was understood that she has given them work and they have become disciples. Then later on, just because we have mentioned this, we may raise a question, what about now? So now she says, whoever I have initiated, I have revealed myself to that person. Meaning thereby, somewhere one knows she is the Divine Mother. There is no ambiguity. So this itself is a sign that one is initiated. She herself has said that physical presence is less and less required. It is required primarily for the physical transformation in its crucial stages. That impact of the supramental forces on the body. Otherwise, all other things of the yoga remain. So these people who came were a representative humanity. So Sri Aurobindo already was having hold of the supramental force and the mother. But will they give it to the world? Is the world ready? This was the question. So they started with a group of representative humanity who were called, they came, and then a grand experiment started. And Sri Aurobindo, that's why he used the word a laboratory in one of his letters, that as per X, this is a laboratory as X has called it. But a laboratory where one is being gradually moved towards a higher and higher spiritual evolution. Now, naturally, what was happening in this laboratory was that people reacted differently to the action of the supramental force. Human mind, heart, life is not ready. As he writes in Savitri, of that pure assault of ether and of fire. And the mother's love, even to her love, people reacted very differently. They started comparing notes. You love him more, you love me less, you smile more, jealousies and ambitions, because after all they come, it doesn't matter. Living in ashram doesn't mean that, one has overnight got free. Whether ashram or elsewhere, one has to do the hard labor. There is no doubt about this. So, each one was representing a difficulty. In fact, the mother initially used the word an impossibility. And each one represented a possibility. So, by representative, we can say that if supposing there were 10 disciples, in the beginning there were very few, maybe 50, and around December 200, 250, and out of which maybe 10 were mainly writing letters, maybe more, but by and large, some of them, most letters, for example, Nirodha, Dilip Kumar Roy, some of these were writing many more letters. So, these disciples represented a very difficult aspect of human nature which is universal. For example, when Dilip Kumar Roy, despite his devotional element, would raise doubts after doubts after doubts. We see something similar with Nirodha. So now it's not that they are somebody inferior. Today when we read, no, they are wonderful beings who have been called by Sri Aurobindo and the mother. But this element in human nature which doubts, or has a tendency to despair, like Dilip Kumar. We see some of these letters where he suddenly throws the hat and says, I am unfit for this yoga. No, this is not meant for me. So he would, or much worse, difficulties. There were disciples who had ambition, lust, fear, everything in nature. So they would write to Sri Aurobindo and the mother and they would reply back. So they apply these letters, though written to individuals, also apply. They have a universal appeal. Some of them are obviously they are based on the eternal truth which applies to everyone, but at the same time there are specific problems and issues which may apply more to some and less to some others. And as Sri Aurobindo himself says that you don't become dogmatic about my letters because there are different people to whom I write different things. To someone who eats less, sleeps less, I would say, eat more, sleep more. And to someone else who does it in abundance, I would say, sleep less and eat less. So while we read the letters, we have to remember this, that we should read the entire thing on a particular section. Everything that Sri Aurobindo and the mother have written, at least, let's say, if one reads Sri Aurobindo, everything that Sri Aurobindo has written for a certain topic. And then one gets the general drift. Otherwise, there is a chance of misapplication. And misapplication of truth is even more dangerous. It's like the man who, the king who had a friend who was sort of an idiot and he wanted to be friendly, and the king got bit compassion on him and said, okay, you guard me at night. And he was very alert with his sword, and he saw a fly sit on the king's chest, and he tried to shoo and got more and more angry till finally he lifted the sword, and the rest is history. So basically, these letters are wonderful. One reads them, but at the same time, in application, one has to have a certain kind of plasticity. The mother has used the word, there should be a wideness and plasticity in applying spiritual things. And these letters are they are all practical things. People often ask about the practice of Sri Aurobindo. Here is the practice of Sri Aurobindo. So these letters are, catered to this questioning, seeking mind that, or the heart which wants to know. For example, how to meditate. There are a series of letters on meditation. Not one, the whole series can make a 250-page booklet, or on bhakti, or on works. But why Sri Aurobindo has not written them as karma yoga, bhakti yoga, jnana yoga? Because if you go through these standard textbooks, you will see that they are drawing from the past. And based on the past, it's kind of interpretation of a text, and then they are presented to entrants. So there is no such thing here, because Sri Aurobindo has not only experienced what traditions say, but gone beyond. So when he writes about bhakti, or let us say karma yoga, Sri Aurobindo makes a distinction between the ordinary karma yoga as given in the Gita and the yoga of karma as is in Sri Aurobindo's transformational yoga. So it's important to understand that he doesn't put them in a fixed, closed slot. Secondly, because it's an integral yoga, and in human nature all the strands are woven together. We can't say I'll do only bhakti alone. So there are letters which say that this is not a yoga of bhakti alone, or meditation alone, or works alone. So there are people who draw conveniently. Oh, I must do only work. I don't want to, nothing else is required. I don't need to meditate. Well, that's not how Sri Aurobindo puts it. All are required. Of course, there is a relative stress, there is a difference in temperament. That's where I said application. Not all are ready for meditation at a particular point of time. So it's perfectly fine. There are some who have this natural urge of bhakti, and this is wonderful if one has it. But if we pick up sentences and quotations from here and there, like one of the things happens is people start seeing hostile forces everywhere and in everything. Whereas actually Sri Aurobindo's yoga is based on oneness. It's hostile forces are there, but that's not the stress. The stress is on seeing the divine everywhere and in everything. So how do we get it? When we read the entire drift. And of course, if we can read the mother and Sri Aurobindo together, then it completes the picture. But very often people pick up, and same with speech, same with actions. So one has to have a subtle intelligence, spiritual intelligence, I would say, which is very different from the hard intellect. Intellect loves to fix things dogmatically. This is how it is. This is not how it is. But spiritual intelligence is far more subtle, plastic, and supple in its application. So this comes as we read Mother and Sri Aurobindo. It may be innately present because of past evolution, or else, better still, if one reads through the letters. So while one should read, the purpose of all this background is, one should read and apply it to oneself and not quote it for others. That you must do it. Look, Sri Aurobindo has written this letter. So these letters are not meant for entering into didactic warfare. This is, often we hear, people say that, and Sri Aurobindo himself has said, they should not be used for that. So we read and we start applying. As we apply, we move. Then we'll read probably another letter, and we'll get another angle. Then a third letter, and we get a third angle. And then as we are growing in the yoga, because it cannot be just by reading the letters or a teaching, however great. If you just read it, it doesn't help. We have to practice it. Whatever, even little, swalpamasya dharmasya, as the Gita puts it. So slowly as we practice it, then we understand all the nitty-gritties. For example, just one last little example. people who read in the beginning about rejection, they feel, oh, what is this? Because it's not mentioned in the Gita and anywhere else. It's something new. And they feel it's very violenced upon your own nature. But as you go through the process, you understand that it's nothing to do with violence. And what really rejection is, and why it is required, and how it has to be done. So then all the letters that one has read previously, they pop up like, what is that called? Pop-up images. And one has to say, oh, that's what is meant. So one has to read again and again and keep applying. One last bit, I remember Jugalda who remembered, I think how many times, I don't know, 21 times he probably had read the complete works of Sri Aurobindo. As far as I've heard. So he was the registrar, very brilliant person. Mother herself said he is a very developed logical mind, perhaps the most developed. So he was the registrar in Center of Education, in knowledge. So he was an authority on, he could remember this from here, that from here, this from here in his classes. And the students who have studied with him, they remember very fondly. So last 2 years, he said, no, I don't want to go there. Somebody else took over. I think Jumurdi is right now. And he started reading. So I asked him, you have already read, you remember everything. Why? I know the delight, but I just wanted to know his point of view. I said, I'm sure you are enjoying it, but any specific purpose? He says, yes, these 2 years, I want to read Sri Aurobindo for the joy of it. And then he told me that particularly the letters on yoga. And that's how he left his body. He was with one of the letters on yoga and reading, and then putting his head on the letter, he left his body. So, and these are very, very simple, finally. Very simple, very direct. Of course, there are many new terms that also there are letters. So, very simple. So, one need not read the life divine and human cycle to practice this yoga. Of course, at one level, one need not read anything, but let's not fool ourselves. Because reading helps, it makes not only the intellect ready, but it also fires the heart. It triggered the, aspiration, because they are fire, living fire. So one should read Sri Aurobindo, and because one finds Sri Aurobindo difficult, because one has only known the life divine, read the letters on yoga, and if one reads through the letters, everything that is there in every other book, its essence is there. All the issues mainly raised in the life divine, without going through the deep arguments, they are there. So basically, of course, the life divine, he will describe with arguments in detail. But in letters on yoga, it's direct. That Sri Aurobindo is saying so. If you have the trust, take it. And several places he says very logically. And many, many more things besides. So I think instead of spending more time in the background, let's plunge into it. So these are several volumes. Now we have entered into that. Letters on Poetry, Art and Literature was the one which we finished last time, which is volume 27. Now 28, 29, 30, 31. These are the 4 volumes of Letters on Yoga, which have been categorized in a certain way, which we'll just speak about. And then 32 is Letters on the Mother. And then 33 is Letters on Himself and the Ashram, and 34 is Autobiographical Notes. And then, of course, you have Savitri, which forms these last 2 volumes. And there is another one which is going to come. I don't think it is of real relevance. It is basically terminology in Sri Aurobindo's writings. So anyways, this comprises the entire volume. So now we are with the letters, and we have finished collected works of Sri Aurobindo, volume 27. Now 28, 29, 30, 31 form one block. So in SABCL, Sri Aurobindo Birth Centenary Library, which came out in 72, it was in 3 volumes. Now it's not a question of volumes, but number of pages. So many, many more letters have been added, because many people who left their bodies. So the letters were discovered. Almost 1/3 of the letters are new. When compared with SABCL. I have read both, so I can say that SABCL and this one, there are many new letters. Also the good thing is that in SABCL, for some reason, there were letters which were chopped. should not have been done. I mean, and there's a whole experience of the mother in the agenda where she speaks about it. Anyways, I don't know whether they are chopped here or not. Frankly, I don't know, because none of us has access to go back to the original and see it. But I know that certain letters have not probably come out. But anyways, they may be too personal. Whatever it is, more letters may even come out later on. We don't know. But right now we have these 4 volumes, and it's a wonderful feast, delight for the seeker soul. And the other good thing about these volumes, collected works of Sri Aurobindo, that many places they have given the question, so which we don't find in SABCL. Now there are another kind of set which is not part of collected works of Sri Aurobindo, but technically it should come as part of writings of Sri Aurobindo, and they are correspondence of Sri Aurobindo with Nirodha and with Dilip Kumar Roy particularly. They form a huge chunk. And Dilip Kumar Roy, I think it's in 3 or 4 volumes. I have read 3. I believe there's a 4th one. Correspondence with Sri Aurobindo, Nirodha, 2 volumes. I think most of the letters are now incorporated here. Many of them were not there in the SAPCL. So that's something, another beautiful addition. The other side is that while they have arranged it very nicely, keeping in mind like how the mind arranges and classifies, those of us, many of us, which includes me, who has read SABCL and have read collected works of Sri Aurobindo, find something missing. And the reason why we find something missing is that sometimes in the arrangement, it's done with good intention. I'm not doubting anybody's intention. Each one has his own way. For instance, you will see some letters on faith and doubt in volume 28. But this does not exhaust all the letters on faith and doubt. So others you will see in volume 29. Then you will see some in volume 32, in 31. Whereas in the previous volumes, they were all clubbed together. They were much fewer, no doubt about it. And sometimes classification or over-classification create this difficulty. But nevertheless, that's a very minor thing. Anyways, we should read everything. Why limit ourselves? But it's important to understand that simply because we have read 1 volume and there were 5 letters on faith and doubt, that means that's all that Sri Aurobindo has written on faith and doubt. So when one reads other volumes, then one discovers many more things, because he's approaching from different angles. So now this series is, as I said, mainly 4 particular volumes, and which comprise what is now called as Letters on Yoga, and they contain 4 parts. The first volume, which is Collected Works of Sri Aurobindo, volume 28, is on foundations of the integral yoga. Basically, it's about the metaphysical foundations, not foundations of the yoga in terms of practice, but metaphysics. Those who want to know what is psychic being, what is divine, Atman, all these terms people enjoy. And if you read the dictionary, you won't find or completely. So there are many terms that Sri Aurobindo has clarified and over-clarified from every point of view. And then there is the second volume, which is volume 29 of Collected Works, is Practice of the Integral Yoga. So here we see a lot of things on bhakti, meditation, jnana, human relationships, life, sleep, dreams, everything, that eating, food, a very exhaustive volume. We'll come to that sometime. And then experiences and realizations in the integral yoga. All that is part of Collected Works of Sri Aurobindo, volume 30. And 31 is transformation of human nature in the integral yoga. All the difficulties of transformation, the process of transformation, the challenges of transformation, how it proceeds, what is the process, the hostile, there you will see some of these obstructing powers, helpful powers, etc., etc. So the idea of all this is that please read Letters on Yoga at least. All the volumes is wonderful. And this present volume, which is volume 28, this contains 5 parts. The divine, first part is the divine, the cosmos, and the individual. Now, I'm not going into why it has been named, because I also don't know why it has been named like this. I would have Probably different people would name it differently. So, anyways, by and large, dealing with these issues. Number two, the parts of the being and the planes of consciousness. Wonderful, very important, we all know. Number three, the evolutionary process and the supermind. So, these letters will consist of all about the supramental evolution, connecting it with the entire spiritual evolution through which it has happened, the logic behind it, the inevitable logic behind it, etc., etc. Here he has also answered some of the questions, doubts raised with regard to other thinkers. Fourth is problems of philosophy, science, religion, and society. Of course, vis-a-vis the integral yoga perspective. And fifth is questions of spiritual and occult knowledge. This is like a sorted category, which I said that many of these could have been elsewhere or should have been elsewhere, but for some reason they are here. So that's okay. So now we can enter into the delight of some of these letters. So obviously there are too many, plenty, and each one can make their own selection. I have made a few which we can read today, if necessary, another class on this very volume. For example, the divine. This is the first letter which comes in this. The divine is the supreme truth because it is the supreme being from whom all have come and in whom all are. So if you have to say supreme, so it is the ultimate reality. But important thing is, Aurobindo says supreme truth because it is the supreme being. Now a casual reading we may miss it. Aurobindo is not saying the divine is a impersonal something. He is not just something, he is someone. He is a being. Now this changes the entire perspective. He is not just the Nirgun Brahman, something much more. Nirgun, Sagun, beyond, all this he explains in these letters. So he is a being with whom we can relate and connect. The divine is that from which all comes, in which all lives, and to return to the truth of the divine, now clouded over by the ignorance, is the soul's aim in life. First thing is to return back, to find the divine, to discover, to become one with it. And what is holding us back is the cloud of ignorance. What is ignorance? All these things. The Shad Ripus plus doubt and company plus fear plus measures, despair, depression, all anger, excitement, attachment, name it, and they are like a whale. Asurik Sena. So, this is the children of Aditi, which is the divine soul in us, and children of Diti, which are also clubbed together. So, that's a problem. The divine is absolute and infinite peace, consciousness, existence, power, and ananda. The divine is everywhere, on all the planes of consciousness, seen by us in different ways and aspects of his being. So this would answer this question that why so many mystics have experienced, but they all come with different. Well, naturally, because divine is not a, standardized building, monument. We like to do that. He is infinite. In fact, there would be perhaps many more paths of yoga which we don't know, simply because people who traveled, they didn't care, or they themselves perhaps didn't understand. They had the definitive experience, but they didn't know how to put it in words. As the mother says, a path of no path. The divine is infinite. He can rejoice in so many ways. Take the soul in. Each soul has its own unique journey. So different people experience in different ways and different aspects. As someone has said, if we say that the divine has the form of Jesus Christ, so when he appears, he'll come as Jesus Christ. If somebody believes that takes the form of Krishna, one will experience him as Krishna or Bodhisattva. Or someone takes it that, he is not form but formless. So even when he is near, you'll not experience the form, but as a formless peace, formless ananda. So depending on, there are many aspects with which people come in contact. And it is very rare, as Aurobindo reveals in one of the letters, that somebody knows him in all the parts, which is what is called as samagram mam. Only in the supermind one can know the divine in all its totality. At the mind always there will be this aspect, that aspect, and therefore we have cults, creeds, sects. So cult, creed, sects and religions, they are all formed when we have one aspect or the other of the divine. But when we have the totality, then we see him everywhere and in all things. The divine is neither personal nor impersonal, formless nor formed. He is the divine. You talk of these distinctions as if they separated the divine into so many separate divines which have nothing to do with each other. It's one totality. It's like a human being. He's a being. You can't cut human beings into pieces and say, oh, this is your brain. This is you. Yes. But this is your heart. Yes, this is also me. And my movement of the heart is also me, and the intellectual activity is also me flowing into it, to put it this way. And the will impelling to action is also me flowing into action. So it depends upon which part we connect with. All the things are the divine because the divine is there, but hidden, not manifest. When the mind goes out to things, it is not with the sense of the divine in them, but for the appearances only which conceal the divine. This is so important. Divine is everywhere in everything. So logically it doesn't matter whatever we do. So he says, no, we are not approaching them with that truth. We are approaching through the appearances, through attractions, through attachments. Therefore, that comes as a veil. And so he says, it is necessary therefore for you as a sadhak to turn entirely to the mother in whom the divine is manifest and not run after the appearances, the desire of which or the interest in which prevents you from meeting the divine. So practical, it's so clear, and there are plenty. This is just the first few letters. If one letter we can put into practice, once the being is consecrated, then it can see the divine everywhere. And then it can include all things in the one consciousness without a separate interest or desire. So we should not imagine that from middle school, primary or higher secondary we'll jump to PhD. That's not the way. It has to be by a progressive enlargement of vision. And then he speaks about the three who are one: transcendent, cosmic and individual divine. The transcendent, as we know, individual, let's start with that. Individual is in each element of creation, in every human being. There is the divine who is the indwelling inhabitant, immanent. And then there is the cosmic divine who is the entire cosmic ignorance and the cosmic truth. And he takes care of that. And then there is the transcendent who transcends the individual and the cosmos. And one has to realize all the three. So he speaks about it is the cosmic self and spirit that is in and behind all things and beings. And then it is the spirit and master of our own being within us, whom we have to serve and learn to express his will in all our movements. So the cosmic and the individual. Third is the divine is transcendent being and spirit, all bliss and light and divine knowledge and power. And towards that highest divine existence and its light we have to rise. So you have the Father, the cosmic, the Son, the individual, and the Holy Spirit, the transcendent. So this distinction is in every... and then he speaks about the Upanishadic system, which follow, the Chatushpad Brahman, Vishwa or Virat, Hiranyagarbha or Taijasa, Pragya or Ishvara. So Pragya or Ishvara is the what is called as Susupti, where all that is not yet manifested lies. And Hiranyagarbha or Tejas, the Lord of the inner worlds, it's the same divine. So he receives whatever is to be manifested. And then there is the Virat or Vishwa, which is the outer expression. And like anything, like any poetry or anybody who creates, it starts from Pragya. From some unknown world, a thought sails. So it has come into Hiranyagarbha. Before that, we don't know. It was sailing. The poetry was somewhere, looking to enter into a receptive mind. Then pop, it enters. Now it has entered the Hiranyagarbha, the inner worlds. And then one day we say, okay, many of them will not see the light of the day, unfortunately, because we are too busy with the internet. But then, sometime when we have time to stand and stare, something will begin to express. Now it becomes Virat. This is an example, just for the sake of understanding. So these two are systems, and then there are 7 worlds. Randomly I picked up some of them which are of practical importance. So the 7 worlds, so this Pragya, Hiranyagarbha and Virat, or we can look at it in another way, as he has said, Ishvara and Taijasa and Vishwa. So it is the Chatuspad Brahman, which is sleep, dream and waking. And there is of course the 4th which is beyond, of which no name can be given. So that is the system. But that you cannot name this way, that way, because it's beyond. Then there are 7 worlds, which the Vedic rishis have spoken about. So we hear in Gayatri Mantra, Om Bhur Bhuvasva Tat Saviturvaram Varenyam Bhargo Devasya Dhimahi Dhiyo Yona Prachodayat. How does Sri Aurobindo say? Om Tat Saviturvaram Rupam. He is going beyond. Starting point is not Om Bhur Bhuvasva Tat Saviturvaram Rupam Jyotihi Parasya Dhimahi Yannaha Satyena Deepayet. So what is the difference? Now, leaving aside the intellectual discussions, people have written on it and so many things. But see, what are the 7 worlds? Bhu is physical. We all know. Bhu Devi, Bhu Mata. Bhuva, vital. It is a little above the Bhulok. Swara, mental. See, the higher mental worlds. Why? Because they receive the light from above. And they can form even a heavenly state, heavens of the ideal, Swarlok. So later on it became Swargalok, which is heavens of the vital. But the Swar is the highest mental world. So Swara, Om Bhur Bhuva Swa. Then comes to the Savita, which is sun. Sri Aurobindo starts from keeping these 3 lower worlds by the side. And this is very interesting why he does that. 4, Mahat, Vigyan, supramental. So these 4 are the Parardh, the upper 4 worlds. So they are the original, absolute, and they are not subject to dissolution. So no pralaya there. They are eternally there, and there is the eternal manifestation which takes place, which we see that in Savitri. Eternal day. In these worlds, there is no dissolution, no death, no disease, no suffering. So, the higher worlds we are yet to come. Oh, we read the lower 3 and then the link suprament. Now the higher worlds, Jnana, Ananda, Satchidanand worlds, Tapaha, world of Chit Tapas, and Satya, world of Sat. So we have these 4 worlds which are higher worlds, Parardh, which is Sat, Chit Tapas, Anand, and the Maharlok, which is the supermind. 4 higher worlds. There is no dissolution. And the 3 lower where there is dissolution of Pralaya, which is Bhulok, Bhuvalok, and Swarlok. Now there again the conception is of Pralaya and Mahapralaya. So Pralaya is where only a portion of creation or earth that gets affected. But Mahapralaya is where even the gods of these worlds are absorbed back into the Parardh. And this is the Aparardh, which is the lower hemisphere, which is a shadow of these 3 higher worlds. So he speaks of so beautifully. So I'll read it this way. Satyalok, Tapalok, Gyan Anandalok. So these are the 3 higher, and Maharlok, Vigyan, which are all included 4 as the higher worlds. But Maharlok is the link. So from the 3 higher worlds, everything, in fact, it is the Maharlok, the supermind, which makes these distinctions. In Satchidanand, there is no distinction, but it is the supermind which creates Satlok, Chit Ghanlok, Anandalok, Gyan Anandalok, and the Maharlok. So it is the supermind which starts this, and then it creates the lower 3 worlds, or at least starts the process. Then it passes the parcel. There are 3 lower worlds which come into existence, which are Bhu, Bhuva, Swar. These are the 3 lower worlds. So why, now we can come little bit about this mantra. So what is the difference? So from the mind, Swarlok, when you jump to the supermind, there is something in between which mystics felt is the higher world. But it is only the lid. That is what Mother and Aurobindo describe, and that is the overmind gnosis. And he says it's so dazzling that when they saw this, Om Bhur Bhuvaswa Tat Savitur, so they felt it is the sun. But actually it is the, yes, it is the link, it is the lid. And whereas when Aurobindo says Tatsa, why does he say the most auspicious form? Because he knows this is the lid. This is not yet the most auspicious form. The most auspicious form is hidden behind the lid. Hiranmayena patrena satyasyapi hitam mukham. So therefore, Om Tat Savitur Varam Rupam, the most auspicious form, which is the supramental. So there is this difference. Apart from many others, that's a different thing, and this how my intuitive sense is. So then, of course, these systems he has explained. He has explained Purush and Prakriti. Those interested can read it. And then, of course, he speaks about transformation of the gunas, which is unique to Aurobindo's yoga. Because when you see the Gita, Gita is you are inwardly free. You are a Jivan Mukt. And yet, as far as your actions is concerned, they will be governed by the three gunas. Sattva, Rajas, Tama. That's what Shri Krishna tells Arjuna. Inwardly you will be free. But you will be, in your action, but they will not afflict you. Why? Because you are surrendered to me, and therefore you don't have to worry about it. But for action, you have to act through them. Meaning thereby that you may have learned the highest music in the world. But when you come to play, you have only three choices of the old instruments. So you are limited. The three gunas are limited action of supernature. That's how they are in the lower nature. The three lower movements. So in this yoga, these gunas have to be also transformed, because it's not enough that you have contact with the divine. Even nature must change into the higher supernature. So he speaks about that. The three gunas become purified and refined and changed into their divine equivalents. It's something very new. Nowhere else we find it. In fact, nowhere else. Sattva becomes Jyotihi. The golden light came down into my mind, and all its rooms sun-touched became. A calm, a bright reply to wisdom's so-called plane, a calm illumination and a flame. So this golden light, when it enters, so then the guna, which is Sattu Gun, is primarily that harmony, light, balance, but it's still a light in the mind. Very nice. Those who want to lead their life according to certain mental principles, ideas, ideals, Sattu Gun Pradhan, according to a scripture, according to the right law. So they are Sattu Gun Sampan, but it is not yet still the Jyoti. Jyoti reveals what is to be done, what is action is to be taken. Ritasya, that's how it is described. So that Jyoti, it gets transformed into Jyotihi, the authentic spiritual light, not the light through the scripture or something else which usually the Sattvic man uses. He uses that scripture, sometimes a kind of inner code he develops from within. But this is the authentic light. Rajas becomes tapas. Right now Rajogun is come with me and the soul goes dragged. So it changes into tapa. So wherever it goes, it changes into that heat and energy and dynamism of the divine action. It changes into luminous force. So Rajogun, the vital, changes into luminous force. So that's why it is tapa. The tranquilly intense divine force. He has just qualified it. Tamas becomes sama, the divine quiet, rest, peace. So that is how tamas changes into that. And there are interesting letters on the Jivatma, the psychic being, and Prakriti. I'll just read a couple of them. So people often ask that why does Aurobindo lay so much emphasis on the Divine Mother? How about the Divine Father? So, of course, one can form any relation. But Divine Mother, it is our truth of our soul. Why? Because all the psychic beings or the soul has emerged from Para Prakriti Jiva Bhuta. So we can take it like that, that this is the, there are several ways, the three, again we enter into that. So you have the Ishvara, Shakti and the Jiva. So that is one way people understand the image of Rama, Lakshmana and Sita. You have the Ishvara, Shakti and the Jiva, who is playing, who is there to serve the divine. And the Jiva automatically, the Jivatma automatically recognizes the Divine Mother because it's born from her womb. But she will connect you to the Father. She mediates between the two. So what really is Jivatma? So he speaks about what is Atma, Jivatma. Let's read this letter. When the one divine manifests its ever inherent multiplicity. Multiplicity is inherent in the divine because he is infinite. That's why multiplicity is inherent. This essential self for Atman becomes for that manifestation the Jivatman. So Atman is the cosmic and Jivatman is individual. So he expresses himself in the cosmicity as the Atman. So you have Paramatman, you have Atman or the cosmic and Jivatman which is individual. So here again, subtle distinction, the Jivatman, the central being who presides from above over the evolution of its personalities and terrestrial lives here, but is itself an eternal portion of the divine and prior to the terrestrial manifestation. Para Prakriti Jiva Bhuta. So what happens before the game starts? The Divine Mother brings out of the infinite divine multiple centers. And they are the central being. They have not entered into the play. And then lower nature, she herself weighs and becomes lower nature. Lower nature creates mind, body, life. And then into these minds, bodies, lives, a portion of the central being, the Jivatma, which is beyond time and space, which is above, a portion of it enters into mind, life, body. So we have a double birth. One which is part which is child of Diti, division, mind, life, body. When we are identified with it, we are Datyas. And when we discover the soul, we are Aditya. Why? Because the soul is always a portion of the Divine Mother. She has become Diti. That's why the story of Kashyap Rishi and his two wives is very interesting. But we have to make a distinction, because otherwise there will be a problem in the yoga. Theoretical is a different thing. So he says that in this lower manifestation, Apara Prakriti, this is the lower manifestation, this eternal portion of the divine appears as the soul, a spark of the divine fire, supporting the individual evolutions, supporting the mental, vital and physical being. The psychic being is the spark growing into a fire. What a beautiful image. So from that central fire, many little flames have emerged. Out of that flame, a spark is sent, and which is the soul, individual soul. It goes through life and death and rebirth, and then it grows itself into the flame here and a fire. So that's how it is. And this psychic being, he says, the psychic being is the spark growing into fire, evolving with the growth of the consciousness. The psychic being is therefore evolutionary, not like the Jivatma prior to the evolution. So Jivatma has two aspects. One is there eternally, safe, sound, healthy. It has the original script. It watches over. So it is above. The experience of the central being comes by going beyond, and one experiences it above. It's not that one has to go through all the planes into the supermind, but simply that's where we have the experience of the Sahasrar, which is beyond. There one experiences the central being. So that is known as Jivatma, which is free. But the psychic being, again a portion of the Jivatma, is experienced by going into the depths of the heart. There we see it has the secret of evolution and linking our this existence with that supreme existence. So in this yoga, there is the importance of the psychic being, also of the central being. At some point, the psychic being joins the central being. So then the psychic being is fully aware now, conscious, why it has come, what is the purpose. It's wonderful. We see this in Savitri, where we have the description of finding of the soul and how they rushed into each other and grew one. So, the soul, representative of the central being, is a spark of the divine. So again he is clarifying. Supporting all individual existence in nature, the psychic being is a conscious form of that soul. Which soul? Which is the representative of the central being. Growing in the evolution, in the persistent process that develops first life in matter, mind in life, and until finally mind can develop into overmind and overmind into the supramental truth. So soul is that portion of Jivatma which has entered into the play. It has identified itself with ignorance, so that ignorance can be carried along, because it has its nature it's like that parasmani. So it carries nature along together. And then the central being is above the Adhar. Most people are not aware of that their central being, Jivatma. They are aware only of the ego. The psychic is the soul. It is a portion of the divine that supports the mind, life and body in the evolution. The psychic gets the divine's help directly from the divine. So he continues with many of these letters. The central being is that which is not born, does not evolve, but presides over all the individual manifestation. When one touches the central being, one knows the previous lives. Those moments which need to be known. Because it is presided. One also can project towards where one is going, because it has the script. One knows the mission and purpose. It receives the essence of all experience. And then I'll just read one more and then probably we can stop. Okay. So some people may think Sri Aurobindo is using two words, central being and psychic being. Once again, one wants to be clear. So there is this letter. The central being and the soul are both in different ways portions of the divine. And there are many central beings of each one. They are in fact two aspects of the same entity. But one is unevolving above nature, the other evolves a psychic being in nature. The phrase central being in our yoga is usually applied to the portion of the divine in us which supports all the rest and survives through death and birth. So it supports. This central being has two forms. Above, it is Jivatma, our true being, of which we become aware when the higher self-knowledge comes. Below, it is the psychic being which stands behind mind, life and body and life. The Jivatman is above the manifestation. The psychic being stands behind the manifestation and life and supports it. And finally, the natural attitude of the psychic being is to feel itself as the child, the son of God, the bhakta. Of course, there will be many letters which it automatically comes. It's not something which can be, oh, you must think you are a child of the Divine Mother. You can't. So, when the realization takes place, it becomes the living state. It is a portion of the divine, one in a sense, but in the dynamics of the manifestation, there is always, even in identity, a difference. So, it is the calf and the cow. Is the calf different from the cow? Well, in a sense, no. Ask the calf, no, I am different in a certain sense. How else will I enjoy the mother's milk and the warmth of the mother cow? So it is one in a sense, yet different in terms of manifestation. And then he says, the Jivatman, on the contrary, the central being, lives in the essence and can merge itself in identity with the divine. So the Jivatma are multiple centers created within the divine. They have not entered the place. So somewhere you will see that description in the house of the spirit and the new creation. Or in the divine soul when Sri Aurobindo speaks in the life divine. So it is not fallen. So it knows itself as a kind of individual, but in terms of essence. Let's take for example that fragrance of a flower is the same. But if you go into this minuteness, you will say there are molecules which are entering into the air. So there is this, each molecule, it is one with the whole fragrance. At the same time, it has its own, it's the manifestation of the multiplicity which has started. So it is one in essence and can merge itself in identity with the divine. But it too, the moment it presides over the dynamics of the manifestation, knows itself as one center of the multiple divine, not as the Purushottama. So this is the difference. Psychic being knows itself as a child of the divine, a portion of the divine. The central being knows that there are many centers of the divine, then the conflict ceases. It is one of the centers, and it must fulfill that aspect, whereas each one has to grow in his own way. It is important to remember this distinction, for otherwise, now, because very often people say Jivatma, it can merge with Paramatma, it is true. But then, because that essence is so close to that identity, it's a very thin. Sri Ramakrishna used to say it's like on water you draw a line, it's like that. But it's important to remember this distinction. Why? Because if there is the least vital egoism, that's why yoga is long. It's not like when one is all with impurity, egoism, one will realize. Why? Because if there is the least vital egoism, one may begin to think of oneself as an avatar or lose balance, like Hriday with Ramakrishna. He was Ramakrishna's nephew, and we all know. He met him, and Sri Ramakrishna gave him that experience of the Jivatma, which is in one with the essence and can join. But see what happened. So he lost his balance. So that's why first the psychic being, then the central being will come inevitably. Then one works in the cosmos as one of the aspects of the divine, or whatever one may like to use it, one of the centers. It's like God, demigod, world personality, different terms Aurobindo has used. Like all the gods, higher gods, they know that each one is one of the centers. But there are many centers, so it's like that. And then, of course, beyond it, that transcendent. So one has a choice of either merging, the Jivatma always have this choice, or it can continue to receive and transmit into the creation via the psychic being. Not to forget that. Namaste.